Hello everybody, today we're looking at KSP 0.9 beta than ever, and we're gonna pop into sandbox mode real quick. So you may notice I'm doing this post-commentary. I actually recorded this for an hour and realized I didn't have any audio, or at least no game audio, or commentary rather. I did have game audio, which I will be merging into here. But today I just wanted to start out by showing some of the new editor tweaks. And so we're going through and building a craft as we normally would. And the thing that I want to demonstrate here is really two things. You can see that we actually have this nifty little editor widget on the side that will allow us to go through and more easily find our parts by certain categories. So here I'm picking up my engines, throwing them on, throwing on some parachutes even though they're not really necessary, and of course putting on fuel lines as well. And so this is what you might think of as a good thing here. And you can see maybe I can't throw down that wow, this is actually going quite fast. What I'm trying to demonstrate here is how we can reroute the parts here so that we can take this command pod, this capsule, and we can turn into a subassembly, which is something that was difficult for us to do before. Now here I'm also demonstrating the offset and the rotation features, and I'm basically doing that by getting structural attachment points, and you see how those guys are sticking out. Well, I can use the offset feature rather to bring them together, and here I'm actually quite curious about what happens when you pull them all the way out, because I'm not sure if the physics engine likes that or not. So we throw Jeb in there, and it actually does turn out, surprisingly, not to cause any issues. But I also wanted to show that we can in fact rotate these, and we can rotate them precisely as well. And so here I have the engines angled in. And I can't really think of a reason why you would want to angle the engines in like that, but nonetheless, you may. So, this actually led to another experiment, a heavy plane using the Mark III parts, and it can actually carry up to, I believe it's 19 people in total. You get 3 in the Mark III cockpit, and you also get 16 in that little crew cabin as well. Now there are various parts here, including these nifty little adapters that let me put the tailplane at the top. But I also wanted to show off something real nifty about the new functionality here. You can see that not only do I have those nacelles hanging off the wing with the engines, but I actually have the engines angled in so that our center of thrust goes through our center of mass. And there's a reason you do want the nacelles on the wings. Typically, airplanes do have the fuel on the wings, and that's largely so that the fuel doesn't shift around. And it's a convenient place to put it too. I mean, you generally don't want to keep fuel where the passengers are. Look at that. That has to be one of the better planes that I've actually made here. I don't think I've ever had such an easy time getting off the ground. And not only that, but with the new editing parts, or the new editing tools rather, I'm actually able to build wings that don't really flop about, which is quite new to me. They're actually pretty sound. And so this was actually a fairly... I think maybe I went through 1 or 2 iterations of this. And right now what I'm trying to do is I'm actually trying to best He built a similar plane. I think his was a little bit bigger. I was a little bit skeptical whether or not I could get mine to land, because his ripped itself apart once it landed on the runway. So, I mean, we are going quite fast here. That is one thing to worry about. I think that is kind of an issue that will happen when you design a space plane. That, you know, you might design a shuttle clone. I mean, these parts do scream space shuttle, for sure. And there's even a cargo bay to go along with it as well. But then again, you may not. I mean, you may want to design a passenger plane for some reason. Anyway, do we land successfully? I mean, at first, you know, when I'm landing, I'm not so sure. And it is a bit violent of a landing, but this is actually, to my way of thinking, a success, even if it does take forever to break. I mean, you do have to remember this is 4 times time acceleration. Anyway, yeah, that capsule there has 16 people in it. So, you know, I decided I was going to start a new career mode game. I basically took all of the funds I could, and I think maybe I increased my science to the maximum. And I want to show some limitations that get thrown into the new career mode. If you thought the last time was hard enough, you will notice here that we've got all this science, and usually that's a good thing. But you can see that as we progress, we've run into this brick wall. We can't unlock anything past 100 science. And in fact, we don't even have enough cash to upgrade that building to where we could. This significantly limits our progression. Similarly, the contract building, as it currently stands, needs to be upgraded. And in that way we can have up to 7 contracts. And then, of course, there's this astronaut complex, which will basically make it to where we can only have 5 astronauts. Now, here you'll notice that all of our astronauts have roles now. So, for instance, Jeb's a pilot, which means that he gets skills that help him with his piloting. And in fact, he will be piloting this craft. Right now, he is a complete novice, though. So this is what I came up with. And I do want to show you real quick just what piloting this thing is like. In fact, you may have noticed I actually hit the limits there. There are limits on both the launch pad and the amount of parts you can use as well. Those are 2 independent things. You have to upgrade the launch pad to get more mass, but you also have to upgrade the VAB to get a larger rocket and one with more parts. And this one kind of hit halfway there. Anyway, Jeb right now has no piloting skill, and that does make things a little bit tricky because you'll notice my orbit is gray. Now I'm looking for the time to apoapsis there. It turns out that I think it's the tracking station that I need for that, but I simply am unable to get that information, so I'm having to eyeball it here. And I mean, it works. Designed a reasonably good craft. In fact, it was a little overpowered for what it was. In career mode, I probably would not design it this way, just because I wouldn't have the money. Although that was like I think like a $17,000 rocket. I probably could have done it, but I wouldn't have had the parts. Anyway, there's another thing too. I actually cannot get out to EVA. I need to upgrade the astronaut complex for that. You know, speaking of that, one of the things I was getting at was that there are also scientists and engineers. So scientists can, from what I understand, increase your science output. And then, of course, engineers, they can repair broken parts, certain broken parts on your vessel. And each of them level up from doing associated tasks. I think maybe even just from being in orbit. So, for instance, Jeb is about to get experience here. And I actually did try a little bit to recover this, because I didn't, it was just a test game. And then I thought, well, there's no real need to recover it that much. I'll just grab Jeb, make sure we have him so we can demonstrate that he is able to gain XP, and this actually gives you a reason not to kill your astronauts. I mean, aside from, the reputation penalty. But you may have briefly noticed there, now he has 1 star. That's from gaining 2 experience. And what we can do now is, you'll notice, we actually have new contracts that tell us to fly to certain places, or put satellites in particular orbits that can be very useful for us. I'm just taking them all here. And you might ask, well, how do I find these places? And as it turns out, there are markers there. It'll give us an idea. In fact, you don't have to accept the contract to see if they'll only go away when the contract is expired. Well, here I am upgrading a few things. Upgrading that facility building, for instance. And I've just built a plane for this mission. Now, of course, forgot to put a thermometer on it, and you will notice that after I put this thermometer on, probably about the worst place possible, that this isn't the most level of runways either. So it's possible by clicking on the icon in map view to get a navigation marker, and this allows us to point directly at the place that we're looking at. Now, I guess at some point, I wasn't paying attention to what I was doing, and you may notice at some point that we actually do manage to fly into the zone. It'll give you a message, and it also seems like the navigation marker will start blinking when you've reached the desired area. I was looking up at the contract thing, and that doesn't tell you when you are in range, unfortunately, because it's expecting you to measure it. Here, of course, I discover a minor issue with my flaps that I needed to correct, but we're coming close to this thing, and this is about the point, I think, here in a couple of seconds where I don't realize that I think it was just then that I entered this zone. And it might be hard to see, but that thing is sort of blinking a little bit, or it was. At least I tend to remember breaking. Yeah, there we go. I just completely neglected to see that message. And so I had to fly out of this thing, make one more pass around it in order to get this data. But I think I did pretty well here. And I think I may start another series based on this, for sure. I've actually got my 0.25 save for Flight for Survival backed up, so I guess now I just want to show you what happens when, I guess as this parting gift, what happens when Jub tries to hold retrograde at applying. It does get pretty amazing. And as we descend towards the ground, I hope that you have enjoyed this video, short as it is, and I will definitely see you next time.